Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is the professor, and today we have a lot to talk about. Of course, I have done a previous video telling you a little bit about the lawsuit, the class action lawsuit that was filed against Eddy Alexandre and all his co-conspirators. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the quarterly report that was filed on April 27th by the receiver. And there is a lot on this report that kind of give you an overview of what EminiFX was truly about. I think this report is damaging for many reasons. One, this report is damaging for Eddy Alexandre's upcoming sentence, which will take place July 18, not July 12, July 18. And also the new class action lawsuit, of course, against the Adventist Church and all the other people. So stay tuned. I will be right back. Welcome back to the professor. Thank you for joining my channel. This episode is going to be in English. Certainly, most of you obviously understand English a bit. And certainly, if I have to do it in Creole, I will. But this is very important. So we're going to talk about the receiver's report, the quarterly report, because the receiver files the report every quarter. So there are 4 quarters of the year. This is the first report of the year that the receiver filed. Now, from the beginning of this case, for the better part of a year, I have been telling you guys about this case. And I have told you that EminiFX was a Ponzi scheme, kind of the classic Ponzi scheme. And I have talked before about the classic Ponzi scheme, but I want to remind all of you, what is a classic Ponzi scheme? A Ponzi scheme is very, very easy to understand, okay? Someone takes money from you, and then they ask you to bring other people. And when you bring other people, they take their money, and they use that money to pay you interest on the money you give them. So it's just a pyramid. It's just people on top of each other, okay? And I have said that. And I know a lot of you understand and believe what I said, but I know some of you still, especially those supporters of Eddy Alexandre, believe that somehow EminiFX was a legitimate business. Now, obviously, I'm traveling, but I said I'm going to stop to make this video because I got a copy of the receiver's report, and there are a lot of good information on that report that I wanted to share with you. So a few things I'm going to share with you. The very first thing I'm going to share with you is this, that the receiver on his report, he made it clear that by the end of the second quarter, okay, he's going to file a motion in court asking the court to approve his claim process. Once the claim process is approved, he's going then to publicize it and allow everyone to know what it is. And I certainly would be talking about it once he's approved and released. And if you are an investor of EminiFX, you will know how to actually make a claim. Now, in his report, he said that each investors must retain, if you've got copies of canceled check, or if you've got copies of wire transfer you made to EminiFX, you have to keep these documents, because these documents are really your proof, your evidence that you actually put money, you give money to EminiFX. And that's what those proofs, you're going to need them in order for you to make a claim once the claim process is established. Now, all things being equal, I'm hoping that the claim process will start before the end of the year. I'm not saying you're going to get money before the end of the year, but the claim process may start. And the reason I say this is because if the receiver filed seeking court permission for the claim process. He submitted the papers in court, and the judge would have to approve it. If that happens, then I assume that by the time Thanksgiving come around, then they will start taking the claims, and hopefully sometime next year, some of you will be receiving money. Now, that's part of what he said on his report. Now, the other thing that I want to talk to you about, some of you may remember that after Eddy Alexandre pled guilty, there were people who were saying that, and of course, those are people who work for EminiFX, who work for Eddy Alexandre. They may be co-conspirators, and some of them are being sued as we speak. They are people who actually helped Eddy Alexandre perpetrated this crime. And the same people were turning around telling people that the receiver was going to issue 1099 to people who made money, okay? So what is a 1099? Normally, if you do work, if you receive any type of income, okay, not from necessarily work where you got a W-2, someone may give you a 1099 just so that they will declare to the IRS that they paid you. And then you have to use that in order to file or pay any taxes that you have to pay. So people from EminiFX were telling the public, the investors, that they were going to get 1099, okay? And I have said before, and I'm going to say this again, and of course the receiver said exactly what I've been saying. There will not be any 1099. The receiver will not issue any 1099 to any investors of EminiFX. And you can read the receiver's report on the bottom of page 14. The receiver said it very clearly that he will not issue 1099 to people who've made money, to investors who've made money. And guess what he said the reason why he would not issue 1099. He said, and I quote, that EminiFX did not pay people out of money that they made by reason of investing. There was no investment being made. In fact, the receiver said very clearly that the money that any investors got was somebody else's money. In other words, when you put your money into EminiFX, your money was not invested somewhere where we got a profit. So those of you who receive money, you only receive somebody else's money, not money from investment. And that's the reason why the receiver said he will not issue a 1099, because he didn't consider money received by these people to be legitimate money. So what does that really mean? It means that there are people, especially the first group of investors who came to EminiFX, who invest money, and some of these investors may have gotten all their money. Some of them may have gotten part of their money. For those of them who got actually more money they put in, let's say somebody put in $100,000 and they got 200,000, okay, in terms of interest and the money that they got. So the $200,000 that they got, this money they're going to keep. No one is going to ask them to disgorge that money. No one is going to ask them. The receiver is not going to ask them. The government is not going to ask them. This money is kept. So what does that mean to you? It means that, let's look at this. If EminiFX, Eddy Alexandre, collected $300 million, and out of the $300 million he collected, let's say he paid out $100 million to people who didn't deserve the money because it wasn't investment money. So you've got about $200 million left. And then you have to talk about all the expenses and everything else. So right now, as it stands right now, the receiver has $156 million in account, because there was some Bitcoin that Eddy Alexandre had. There was some cryptocurrency. Those crypto were liquidated and the money came in, and now they have that cash. So there was approximately 62,000 investors. We assume that $300 million, all things being equal, $4,000 per investors, okay, in terms of investment. Now, we know that's not what people did. We know that people invested more money than that. So there were different people that invested different amount of money. Some people invested 100,000, some people 50,000, some people 100,000. And I hate to use the term invested because this wasn't an investment. Most of you give money. You just kind of give the money to Eddy Alexandre. There was no investment. There was no contract. There was nothing. So this was not an investment. This is just money you gave to Eddy Alexandre, because he told you he was going to invest it. But we know that's not what happened. So having said that, what we have to keep in mind is that there's money. You're not ever going to get as much money as you put in, okay? Forget about that. You're not going to get your money. And when I return, I'm going to tell you how the class action lawsuit is going to make you whole, how the class action lawsuit is going to help you get your money. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Welcome back to the professor. Thank you for joining my channel on YouTube. You are listening to the professor. Thank you for staying with me. So I was earlier talking about the report, the receiver's report, what's in it, and how the receiver kind of weaved through explaining what EminiFX was about. And I know this is not a surprise. This shouldn't be a surprise to any of you. And I have been telling you for almost a year now, EminiFX was a Ponzi scheme. It wasn't a legitimate business. And it was something that Eddy Alexandre and his group did just to take your money, to defraud you. Now, in the first part, we talk a little bit about when you should expect that the process will be unveiled by the receiver, and then when you can actually expect some money sometime next year, not this year. So let's talk a little bit about because if you did read the receiver's report kind of traced down everything, explaining how they believe EminiFX, was set and what happened to the asset, to the contribution of money, so to speak, that the investors put into EminiFX. And then what the receiver did in terms of liquidating some of the asset, getting some of that money back. And of course, the receiver sold all of the Bitcoins, and they also got money from deposits that Eddy Alexandre had made in the attempt to buy certain property. All those deposits were returned. So as of now, as I'm speaking to you now, based on the receiver's report, he's got in hand $156 million. So whether that would be enough to compensate, everyone that gave money to Eddy Alexandre, we don't know. But what I know is that there are a lot of people who actually were giving money, cash money, to other people, supposedly to invest for them. There are people who had wired money to somebody's account, to a third person account, hoping that person would invest for them in EminiFX. So we don't know where these people are going to be, whether they're going to get any money at all. For one thing, we don't even know whether the money that they are giving to a third party actually made it to EminiFX at all. So let's assume for a minute that that happened, okay? So if you don't have a receipt, if you don't have any way of proving that you give money to EminiFX, you're going to have a big problem recouping your money or getting some of that money back. Not all of it, some of it. Now, remember I told you a week ago that a huge class action lawsuit was filed by 2 attorneys in Miami against Eddy Alexandre, his wife, and all the people who were working with Eddy Alexandre, especially those who attended the Thursday meeting that He when he were where actually he was lying to you every weekend, every week when he had this meeting, he was telling you a lie or another. So all of these people had been sued, including many of the churches. Now, I know that the minute that the lawsuit was issued, everyone was going crazy, especially from the Adventist church. People were saying they had nothing to do with it. And let me tell you something, guys, okay? If you are a member of the Adventist church, I need you to put your emotion aside and listen to what I'm saying, okay? Before you say anything. I want you to hear what I'm saying. You hear me out. You don't have to agree. I want you to hear me. Eddy Alexandre was not somebody that everyone in the community knew. Eddy Alexandre wasn't like a lot of people, okay? Eddy Alexandre was a chaplain in the Baptist church, in the Adventist church. A lot of people in the church, within the Adventist church, knew who Eddy Alexandre was. So Eddy Alexandre used his influence in the Adventist church to get the pastors to join him in this criminal, illegal Ponzi scheme. Okay? Now, I know some of the pastors have called the lawyers complaining that they have nothing to do with this, so on and so forth. But this is not what the parishioners are saying. The parishioners are saying that the pastor encouraged them. The pastor were calling them, asking them to invest. Some of the pastors were telling me it was God's will for them to invest in EminiFX. Now, that doesn't mean that the pastor actually knew that this was a Ponzi scheme. And I'm not saying that. That's what I said. I want you to hear what I'm saying, okay? Here's what I'm saying. There is no way on God's green earth that Eddy Alexandre by himself would have been able to raise $300 million from 62,000 Haitian, okay? It ain't gonna happen. The only way this could happen, this only way it's possible, is if Eddy Alexandre had a credible organization behind him that was assisting him, helping him. And this is where the Adventist church came in, because I know for a fact, and I heard with my ears, pastors, okay, pastors in the Adventist church who were on the radio telling people to invest, who actually participated on Eddy Alexandre's Thursday weekly meeting on Thursday, telling people to invest. And I have been investing this case from the time before Eddy Alexandre was arrested. And I knew before Eddy Alexandre was arrested, there were pastors who allowed Eddy Alexandre to come to their church, who allowed Eddy Alexandre access to the pulpit to talk to people about investing. And this was just pastors in New York. There were pastors in Miami. There were pastors in Texas, in Pennsylvania, in Connecticut, in Boston. All of them allow Eddy Alexandre to come to their church. Now, if they didn't allow Eddy Alexandre to come to their church, they were telling the parishioners that they should invest, okay? Now, having said that, maybe the pastors thought this was a way to help their parishioners. Maybe the pastors thought this was a good deal. Maybe they didn't think there was anything wrong with it, okay? I'm saying maybe. But here's the problem, okay? A pastor plays an important role in the church. He's the spiritual leader of the church. When he tells a parishioner to jump, the parishioner asks, how high should I jump? So they see the pastor as a figure of authority, as Christ himself. So when the pastor ask somebody to do X, Y, and Z, guess what? They're going to go ahead and do it. Now, that's not entirely a bad thing. And I don't want you to think that I'm bad-mouthing. I'm saying it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but here's where the problem lies. If a pastor, okay, let me take an example. A pastor mon premier, okay? And a lot of you who are in the Adventist church know who Pastor mon premier is. Pastor mon premier is one of the person that got sued, okay? One of the pastors. Well, many pastors, but he's one of them. And I know for a fact that this man had been telling people to invest. And he had made statement about how he believes and EminiFX. Well, maybe Pastor Mopremier did not know what Eddy Alexandre was doing. I'm saying maybe, I don't know. We haven't had any discovery. I can say for sure that I know, but I'm saying maybe he didn't know. Now, if he didn't know this was a Ponzi scheme, he had no business telling people to invest, because as a pastor, he has a special duty to make sure that if he's going to advise people to do something, and this is out of being a pastor, this has nothing to do with spirituality. This has nothing to do with advising people about their spiritual well-being. This is just about money. And if this man was going to do that, he's going to tell people, yeah, you should invest in this. At least he should have investigated it. At least he should have said, wait a second, where is the money coming from? How is the investment being made? How much money we expect to have? Where all the money coming from? Do you have a ledger? Do you have a contract? How is this going to be done? Is this legal? Do you have a lawyer? Can we speak to the lawyer? The pastors, none of them did any of that. Not a single one of them. All of them got into the bandwagon and follow Eddy to this criminality. Now, here's what happened. When the pastors, and I can tell you that a lot of the pastors who were telling their parishioners to put in money, and then they kept telling the people, do not withdraw your money, because you're not going to be a millionaire if you withdraw your money. You got to keep your money. You got to keep your money. You know why the pastors were saying that? And this is how I know they knew. The pastors were telling people to not to withdraw their money, to keep their money, because they knew that if people started to withdraw their money, the entire thing would have collapsed. Why? Because there would be no money to pay every Friday. So the idea is to get as much people to keep their money there, okay? And then meanwhile, guess what happened? The pastors were actually taking their own money. They were making money on top of you. They were taking their own money while they're telling you not to withdraw your money. Now, a few weeks ago, I had a conversation with a young lady in Florida. And she's a nurse, and she said to me, Professor, I invested my first $30,000 because my pastor told me to invest. She told me it was a good thing, and I invested. He said, the day that they arrested Eddy Alexandre, I was about to invest another $30,000 because my pastor came back to me and said, no, you're a nurse. Actually, she's more than a nurse. She said, my pastor told me to invest more money because I was going to be a millionaire. He said, you know what hurts me? What hurts me is that after Eddy Alexandre was arrested, the same pastor who told me to invest never came to me or to anybody at the church to say, hey, here's what's going on. Here's how we, you may get your money back. The pastor just totally ignored this, as if this was something that never happened, as this was something that was going to disappear. Now, what the pastors do not realize is that people like me and the lawyers, we talking to people inside the church every day. They're telling us what's going on. This is not something we made up. This is something they're telling us. Now, for me, probably the only person who's been talking about EminiFX, and I got to tell you, if it wasn't for me, EminiFX, people would not have heard about EminiFX, and there probably wouldn't be a lawsuit, because I have been for almost a year telling my viewers, the investors of EminiFX, that you're going to lose all your money unless you sue somebody. Now, when I say sue somebody, what do I mean? Anyone who helped Eddy Alexandre, whether he was the pastor who allowed Eddy to come to his church, whether he was the guy next door who were going around the neighborhood asking people for money, anybody who helped Eddy Alexandre has a liability, okay? And because if you were going to go out and raise money, ask people for money to invest, you have a duty to find out what the investment was about. You have a duty to find out where the money was coming from, especially at the church. Now, I know that people from the Baptist church, some of the pastors, some of the elders, they call them elders of the church, they're going crazy because they're saying, oh, this is going to destroy the church. But it is not. it is not going to destroy the church. If anything, this lawsuit is going to make the church better. Okay, let me explain to you why. The GCC, which is the General Conference Corporation, okay, is basically the heads of the entire Adventist church, okay? And certainly the different conferences, the Southern Conference, Eastern Conference, Northern Conference, Florida State Conference, New York, and so on, the local churches basically report to the local conferences. The local conferences report to the regional conference. The regional conference report to the GCC. Now, here's the problem. The pastors of the Adventist church are being paid by the central, by the GCC. Some people might say, oh, no, it's not the GCC, they're being paid by regional. Here's the idea. The idea is very simple. At the end of the day, the person who's responsible for anything that happened inside the church, especially things that hurts people, is the GCC, the General Conference Corporation. Now, they're also being sued. And quite frankly, whether they knew or not know, that's not the point. The point is they should have known. And I'm pretty sure that the local conferences knew. I'm pretty sure that the regional conference knew. And I'm pretty sure that the GCC knew. So that being said, they have a duty to make sure that the pastor that they're paying do not get involved in criminal scheme. They not get involved in defrauding the very people they're supposed to protect. Your pastors are there to protect you. The pastors are there to give you spiritual guidance, spiritual support. If you have a problem, family problem, you go to your pastors, you talk. You don't expect your pastors to get together with somebody else and defrauded you. That's not your expectation. And I think that there were a lot of secret inside the Adventist church. I think that a lot of people are afraid to speak because if they said anything, other people in the church would say, oh, you're selling us out, you're airing our dirty laundries for everyone to hear and see, blah, blah, blah. We know that because people inside the church come to me every day, call me every day. My phone keep ringing every day. It's all people from the church. It's not some people outside. It's people who are inside the church who are telling me what's going on. So they're tired and they're afraid of talking. So I'm going to be their mouthpiece. I'm going to talk for them. And I think that the lawsuit is going to do a number of things. One, Eddy Alexandre got arrested, but there were probably another 50, 60 people who could have gotten arrested. They haven't gotten arrested, number one. Number two, we know a lot of the Adventist pastors were involved. Some of them were more vocal than others. Some of them were out there talking. We know there are also some Adventist and Baptist pastors also who were involved in this. And the lawyers are going after all of them. And eventually, in a lawsuit like that, eventually we're going to find out the truth because people are going to be deposed under oath. This is a federal case, so they can't, bullshit around. They have to do what they have to do. And everybody got to get lawyers, and we're going to find out what happened. And at the end of the day, if the lawyers discovered that some people knew really well what was going on and they partake, then the lawyer might refer them to the U.S. Attorney for prosecution. Because here's what I'm thinking, guys. The Haitian community is a good community, okay? And things happen, people do good business, bad business, whatever happened. But this case here, this EminiFX here, was a huge, huge, huge scam that was focused specifically upon the Haitian community, because obviously Eddy Alexandre is Haitian. Most, if not all, of the pastors in the Baptist church who were involved in this are Haitians. So this is something that concerned the community. And I think it would have been a crime for people to just kind of say, oh, it's nothing. No. It's not nothing. It's something. And I think if people understand that, if they do something like that in the community, people are not just going to sit around and do nothing. No, we're going to talk about it. We're going to let the community know the truth. And at this point in time, nobody knows really what happened. Everybody seems to think that Eddy Alexandre is the only guilty party, that Eddy Alexandre told the court, oh yeah, it was nobody else, it was me. But Eddy Alexandre was lying. He's a liar. We can't believe what he said because he's not going to tell the truth. Why should he tell the truth? He never talked about his wife, who were the CFO, the chief financial officer. He didn't talk about Jeffrey. He didn't talk about his sister. He didn't talk about all these people who actually every day was helping him take people's money. He didn't talk about these people because he didn't want, obviously, these people to get into trouble. But the lawsuit, obviously, will talk about that. The lawsuit will force all of these people to come forward. And I am so looking forward to see what's going to happen, because once Eddy Alexandre is going to be sentenced on July 18, and the judge may send him to prison the day that he's sentenced, which is July 18, or the judge may give him some time to report to prison, because normally when you are sentenced, there are times when, if your lawyer said to the judge, hey, you know, he needs time, or the person needs time to say goodbye to family members or friends, whatever, the judge would do that. Some of the judge would allow you maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks or whatever, 3 weeks for you to get your affairs together and so on and so forth, and then report to prison. But in the case of Eddy Alexandre, I knew that the judge wanted his sentence to be closer, but the lawyer said that he needed more time so he can help get some of that money back to the receiver, and also to arrange his affair before he goes to prison. So it may as well go on July 18 or shortly thereafter. But the class action lawsuit had just started, and it's going to take some time because all of the defendants have to be served. Everybody going to have their own lawyer. So this is going to be, you know, a great show, so to speak. And I can't wait to see what the pastors are going to say. I know a lot of pastors, they knew what was going on. They knew they were involved. So they're going to have to get lawyers. And like I gave Eddy Alexandre advice, unsolicited, unpaid advice, when I told him that the best thing he could do is to plead guilty. And I'm glad that his lawyers see it the same way. He pled guilty. What I didn't advise him to do was to forfeit the money to the government. And a lot of people do not understand, because they keep saying, well, yeah, the receiver said they're going to give me the money, blah, 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 and they're going to do this, they're going to do that. No, there's a legal difference between forfeiting something to the government and basically giving it to the receiver and say, hey, give that to the people who give me money. And that's not what the government is going to do. The government is going to make you jump through hoops to prove that you gave money before they can give you some of your money back. And if your proof is sufficient, maybe you may get some money, because you may give some document and the receiver said, oh, won't do, and you don't get anything. So it's not like they're going to write you a check just because your name appears in some ledger that says that, oh yeah, Gary sent, you know, $50,000. Gary, he's 25 out of the 50. No, Gary's going to have to come and say, okay, here's when I send the money. Here's where I send the money. Here's who I send it to. Here's where they got it. This is the day they got it. And this is where the money come from. Because a lot of people are going to have a lot of problems. Okay? So I don't want to talk about that more, but think about it for a minute. Because the taxman is always looking, and the taxman wants his money too. Whether it's legal or illegal, they want their money too. So having said that, guys, this is the update. So you remember, the receiver filed the first quarterly report April 27, which is about a week from now, a week ago. So about a week ago. And the receiver said he's going to ask the court permission to publish the process by which you can make a claim. That will come at the end of the second quarter, all right, which means that in the next few months. The receiver said also he's not going to issue 1099 to anyone because he did not consider that whatever money they get was legitimate money. In other words, he said there was no investment. He said actually that page 14, look at the receivers report, page 14, he said there was no investment. So no one is getting 1099, which is when people from EminiFX were telling you that the receiver was going to issue 1099, blah, 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 they all were lying, and which I told you a long time ago that there were a whole bunch of lies. They can't, they can't tell you the truth because it's not in the best advantage to tell you the truth. So this is basically the update, and I am still waiting to get a copy of the class action complaint because I want to talk about all the defendant. I want to tell you who they are, what part they play in the scheme. So if you follow the professor, you can subscribe to my channel, and then you will learn about all of this. We'll talk about a little bit of the Adventist Church, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I know a lot of people are going to be upset, but this is not for you to get upset. It's for you to learn and do better in the future. Well, this was the professor. This has been the professor with you from my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time with another episode of EminiFX. How deep is the rabbit hole? We shall find out. Thank you.